Hey, what's going on? This is the Saturday Down South podcast. I am Connor O'Gara. Will, it appears that there are some pretty important behind-the-scenes people who read our guy Brett Merriman's proposal to fix college football. Shout out to our guy Brett, not to be confused with Sean Merriman, as I called him the other day. Not that guy, different Merriman. But if you saw the big news on Wednesday night, The Athletic reported that a super league with a breakaway from the NCAA is being discussed. And I gotta say, I don't hate all of this. There was, so if you didn't see this, if you haven't read The Athletic, you don't have Athletic subscription, you didn't see, it aggregated somewhere else or anything like that. Because I say that, when we were talking earlier, and I was telling you about this, you had this look in your face like, oh man. And I'm sure a lot of people, when they first saw that, when you hear that term Super League get thrown out, as a college football fan, your heart kind of skips a beat. Your stomach kind of drops a little bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, well, see, that's the thing is it's like we always talk about never present a problem without a solution, right? It's the thing is the NCAA is a problem. So I'm weirdly more for this than I was the expanded playoff because I'm like, well, we know we in our entire lives have never once thought, maybe when we were young, maybe when we were naive, when we were 10 years old, we were like, wow, college student athletes are so smart. But I'll tell you what, I was listening to funny enough, a Wall Street Journal podcast about this the other day.
Sick brag.
And the Journal is a great podcast. And I'll put it on when it applies to me. I'm not that brainiac level. I'm picking up, not an everyday listener, but they had one about the Dartmouth basketball team that unionized. And I'm sure you'll talk about that a little bit later, but the union aspect of it. But the thing that was interesting is that the term student athlete came from a lawsuit in which the NCAA fought to not pay players. And so this whole beautiful thing of, they're all student athletes, so all collegiate, banner case. No, that's actually just a code word for dude who we don't want to pay.
It really is if you kind of look at this, and that's what this proposed model to fix college football is trying to solve, so that it's more private equity funded instead of collective funded, and working through these weird unenforceable rules that the NCAA currently has, and dealing with all these potential lawsuits for pre-2021 cases with people who are like, hey, I'm suing you because you're saying this wasn't legal then, but it is now. All these things that they're trying to work past. But if you didn't see what this was, here's kind of the gist of this. This would be no more NCAA. Players could have a union, as you talk about, collectively bargain, get paid differently, obviously. No more playoff selection committee, because there would be 70 permanent teams, basically like what the Power 5, Core 4, whatever you want to call it, is currently constructed as.
No playoff selection committee. I hate that.
There will be no people sitting around a Holiday Inn conference room in Dallas, or just, I guess, Irvine. That's where they usually have this stuff, eating crappy food, telling college football fans about whatever sort of metric they decided to enforce this year.
Losses, good.
2 loss, bad. We decide bad. Undefeated but no quarterback, bad. We do not like that. There would be no more of that. There would instead be these 8 divisions of 10. And then there would, one of those divisions of 10 would be this second tier that could, be determined by, essentially performance-based. That would be group of 5 type teams. And the permanent 70 would never be in jeopardy. So it's not you wouldn't be in jeopardy of dropping. So it wouldn't be true relegation in that sense. The idea that's been thrown out by a lot of different places. College sports tomorrow, CST. I know that already is the acronym for Central Standard Time, so that's kind of confusing.
I think sounds like a ride I would design at Disney World.
I would go on that ride. CST, not to be confused with CTE. Probably a ride that gives you CTE, maybe. I don't know. First roller coaster I ever went on, the Demon, Six Flags Great America, Gurnee, Illinois. Definitely got a concussion from that. No doubt whatsoever. Yeah. But CST, that is a 20-person behind-the-scenes group to fund college football. That is kind of what this is all about. There are some very influential people who want to get this going. That's why this is news. That's why we're talking about it right now. But there are some significant hurdles in the short term, mainly the fact that, as the Athletic said, the SEC, Big Ten, and Big 12 have all not met with CST because they don't want to upset their TV partners, which makes a lot of sense because there's a ton of money on the line, and you
Right.
don't want breach of contract as we're about to enter this all important era of trying to figure out how to fund certain things and trying to squeeze every last dollar out of these media contracts. But basically, you could put the entire college football landscape under this one TV contract. And instead of dividing it up conference by conference, the thought is you could do it the NFL way and have more of this pro sports model, and it would be a more lucrative deal. And that would be the financial incentive. Universities would own a percentage of the league, and bigger brands would get a bigger piece of the pie. So Vandy is not getting the same cut as Alabama and Notre Dame, stuff like that. It's interesting. I don't know how imminent it is, if that's the question that people are wondering about. So if you're fearing that this is going to happen tomorrow, it's not. But at the same time, it is a reminder that this sport is definitely changing. It needs change. I don't know if all of these changes that laid out are the best changes to get there, but the ball is at least rolling a little bit, and this story was a reminder of that.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that, like I said, so there was kind of rumblings of this. I mean, honestly, around the first playoff expansions, I remember this is something me and one of my friends were back and forth over, and I was just wrong. I was like, well, that's not going to happen. Da, 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 da. I was, it felt like putting the cart before the horse at that point, but we've seen the NCAA just descend into even more turmoil, kind of like I was saying. And so we're kind of at a point where the stuff the NCAA should be handling, they're not good at. The stuff that they shouldn't be handling, they're meddling in. So it's like, hey, and the question that I would have here, and I hate to just put it on the spot, but like, what does this leave something like March Madness?
NCAA is running March Madness, so
right.
Like that's still under their jurisdiction, and treating college football. I think this is just about trying. I think the entire goal, if I'm not mistaken, and I could be wrong with the intent of this, is to try and make sure that college football is treated differently than it currently is. And those contracts, the way that they're set up, I'm sure that there would be ways that it's tied to this. But I do think that this is all being done with college football in mind, because that's kind of what all of these media contracts and conference expansion are done, to try and do right by, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it weirdly feels like that's a great solution, because it's like, I mean, again, and I said this from the beginning, who is getting hurt here, right? It's the, non-rev sports, it's the women's sports. It's okay, well, you play for UCLA and you're on like the water polo team, and now you got to go fly to Iowa and you got to go to Rutgers and you got to have a test on Wednesday. And so like my thing is like, hey, college football has always been always is kind of a stretch, because there's some, I mean, back in the day, talking, 80s and stuff, like March Madness might have been right about there in terms of like interest and stuff, but at least over our lives, football has been the big revenue driver for sure. And so, like you said, like, yeah, let's take that as a separate product. Let's say, okay, if you want to commit to this, you're a professional athlete. Let's stop pulling let's pull the veil off of that. But the other side is, if you're playing volleyball, water polo, that type of stuff, like I do think that collegiate experience is probably going to be more valuable. So maybe the NCAA looks at it and goes, hey, you know what? Actually, man, this football thing has gotten a little bit too big for us. It's a little bit too much of a hassle. Let's go shoot football over there. You guys can go handle that. And we're still going to have March Madness, which for the NCAA is technically like their biggest moneymaker, because the college football playoff is a property of ESPN. So March Madness is all owned by the NCAA. So if they're just like, hey, like here's our big flagship, we're going to go focus on March Madness. We're going to go focus on our archaic rules that in some cases make sense if you're not, making 200 G's, some cases, maybe you should be able to, or maybe the transfer portal shouldn't be 3 times. Maybe it should be you have to commit to a coach and a program for your education. Like those athletes who don't have an opportunity to go pro and make money, like, because like I said, yeah, if you're in an Olympic sport, or if you're in like most women's sports, and we could talk about how the NCAA and the WNBA and the NWSL have kind of like increased in prominence over the years, but still, outside of the Olympics, for most sports, there isn't that opportunity at the next level. So that should be treated differently than football, where you see more and more leagues being created. You see this merger that The Rock is doing. You see that if you're a solid, B- level football player, you can it's going to be like basketball. You can go find a career somewhere. So yeah, I actually kind of think this is one of the more logical changes that's happened recently.
Yeah, and it's not a change yet. It's not a
Right.
change yet. It's just a proposed change.
Right.
And if you don't have those big decision makers on board, if you don't have the SEC, Big 10, Big 12 on board, like, okay, that's kind of a big holdup. It still takes a certain relinquishing of power
Yeah.
to ever really get anything like this in motion. And
Yeah.
that's why something like this isn't just snap of the fingers. It can happen tomorrow. There are a lot of things still to sort through, but it was big headline news on Wednesday nights. And for those who saw this and thought kind of like, what does this mean?
Mm-hmm.
I would say it's a reminder that there are important people that want to change college athletics and the basic
Yep.
model of it. And we should probably all brace for those changes. Some we will like, some we probably will not like, but it does feel like change is coming. It's just a matter of when, what it looks like with TV contracts, what it officially looks like behind the scenes with universities, what that cut looks like, all of those different things.
I will say this too. There was an allegory to this in soccer because remember they tried to make the Super League that was like multinational and all the fans rioted. And I remember thinking at the time, all the kind of international soccer fans were like, "Oh, this is why we're more serious than American sports fans." Like, well, here's the difference, right? Those rivalries are what they were protecting, right? Those are 100-year-old, more sometimes more in soccer. Those rivalries are gone in college football. There's no going back now. Like the Pac-12 is dead, so there's really nothing to fight for when it comes to this stuff. So I would say that's the one caveat of like, yeah, if you are ripping, like, if this was proposed 5 years ago, I'm sure fans would have been up in arms, right? But the fact that it's, or probably even before the 4 team, this is what it would have been. Now it's like, all right, what's next, you know?
You can keep rivalries alive. It's a 70 team. It's called a super league in theory, but it's 70 teams. It's a lot. I mean, it's not like it's drastically changing. It wouldn't drastically change who's considered elite and who's not. It wouldn't all of a sudden be like, oh, hey, you had a couple of 6-win seasons, you're relegated, you're gone. Like it would not be like that for the core 4 Power 5 type teams. So you could still keep those rivalries intact if obviously that's going to be there's financial incentive from the TV contract side to do that as well, because
and there's a path to reignite those rivalries. Anyway, you could have a situation where Florida plays FSU, Miami, even UCF every year if they so chose, right? If they're still in the power structure. So yeah, the more I think about it, the more we're just like, we're actually kind of getting better if we do this. I don't know.
Yeah. It could be a lot worse. I thought I would hate it a little bit more because when you see that, you're like, oh, no. But there are some elements that I really like that, could potentially be the future of college football as we know it. We have a lot to get to today. We have an awesome show ahead. Alex Golesh is going to join us in a little bit. Great to catch up with him. Just post year 1 at USF. A lot of momentum for his program this offseason. They
have beaten the Basura allegations. They are no longer Basura. He has taken them out of the trash. They are on the way up.
Absolutely, man. I mean, my guy Brett Crawford's got him in the 12-team playoff projection way too early. Like that's how quickly things have turned around. There are good vibes teams in college football this offseason, and USF is definitely one of them. Just fantastic perspective from him post year 1. I think some interesting comments about the Bama game that I think would catch some people a little bit off guard about that experience as well. And we have bury the lead here. We have a champion for our jersey contest, and Will, you are repping it. The YouTube audience gets to see it. We're going to save that for the other part of the podcast for the after the interview. Just another reason to go subscribe to Saturday Down South on YouTube. But first,
another enemy of the NCAA. Wow, they're meddling again.
Well, we talked about last time we did this a month ago, having draft day, the first Thursday of every month during the off season can be draft day. So last time, of course, we drafted SEC offensive coordinators. This time I thought it'd be interesting to branch outside of the SEC and do non-SEC head coaches. We are drafting today non-SEC head coaches. I thought that'd be a better way to do it because it takes some of the biases away, and I think it kind of forces us to have a similar perspective about a coach or about a program or something like that. And if we're being honest, like, we talk enough about SEC coaches. 6 of the 7 would probably be SEC coaches. The way that it sets up right now, that's not, I don't think, a particularly biased take. Even if you go look up rankings of top 25, top 10 coaches in college football, there's a good chance that the majority of that top 10 is coming from the SEC. So that's the way that I think would be fair to approach this today. The context, you don't have to, But I personally want to feel good about my picks a year from now. So I'm projecting a little bit, right? I'm not just drafting the most accomplished team of coaches. That's
Right.
not necessarily my goal. If I want to just do that, I'll just go look at the all-time wins leaders and I'll just draft based on that. That's kind of boring. Nobody really cares. So
Right.
you don't just have to take the most accomplished coaches. You can do a little bit of projecting and say, this is why I think this person, and you could say like, at this time next year, I think he will be widely considered a top 5, top 3 coach in college football. So you can kind of go whatever way that you want about this, but I want to feel good about my draft after 2024 as well. Does that all make sense?
Yes, I do want to say this. This might be tough to put you on the spot here, but I think we need to pick a university, right? So if it's like is it Alabama? Is it UCLA? Is it because different? Like, okay, we talked about this with Glenn Schumann, right? It's like he's at Georgia, which is an amazing situation, so we'll have him number 1. But does that mean if I was at UCLA, I would take him number 1? I don't know. You know what I'm saying? So I think we could get a little bit. So is it a medium? Like if I'm at UCLA right now, is this the coach I'm picking, or is this I have a top level job and I need to go win a championship?
It's very interesting. So you're saying if you were an athletic director and you had to go hire one of these guys to run your program, I think I would approach. Yeah, I think I like that approach. I think if I'm coach starting mid-level Power 5 type job and I have free reign, I can write a blank check. Let's say, I mean, they won't like that I said this. Let's say your hypothetical is like Texas A&M, unlimited check. Not necessarily.
It's so perfect, actually. Yeah.
Not necessarily championship level success. A&M fans, don't get mad at me playing a conference championship game in the 21st century before we have that conversation. But the resources are there, and you can go out, you can plug someone. You're not necessarily trying to get the best bargain, but you're an athletic director, and you're trying to say, I want to go hire this coach. I would love to be able to have this coach for this season, for the remainder of his contract, whatever it may be. That's a good question, though. I like that because that's usually the way I try and approach these things when I do like a ranking of like what quarterback would I want running my team. That's why I always default to KJ. KJ's a dog. Like I just want KJ running my team.
If you don't name the team, like I would take like a Cam Newton, right? If you have if you have the Saints roster, if you have that, like maybe I'd take Drew Brees, Tom Brady, that type of guy who like I know can put in a system. But if I know your line is trash, I know you don't have any receivers, give me Cam.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, you wonder how teams have approached that in the past of like, okay, so at Kansas, for example, when a Kansas goes after Les Miles, you went after one of the most accomplished coaches in the country, and then very quickly found out that he wasn't necessarily cut out for the job that he took on. And would you go back and do it over again? Yeah, probably. To Kansas's credit, Kansas did that. But it does kind of beg the question of like, what's the type of job that you're hiring for? But let's just say resources are there, right? And you need to be able to build up a program, go out and win games at a high level. Simple as that.
And I think this goes without saying, Texas and Oklahoma are now SEC schools, so those do not count.
Cool. Correct. Good question. Texas and Oklahoma are now SEC schools. That means Sark is off the board. That means Venables is off the board.
That would have been hilarious if I was like, Steve Sarkisian. You were like, buddy. I just want to make sure we're on the same page there.
Yeah, it's a little bit weird because like with a lot of the content that we do on SDS, they're not officially in the SEC until this summer. But I have already turned the page.
We've turned the page. It's over.
As people who listen to the show know, like I very much turned the page. And as far as 2024 is concerned, they are part of the SEC. Okay, Will, cool. Would you like first pick or second two?
Second two.
Dang. One of these days, I'm just going to take it myself. All right. I got first pick.
Yep.
My 1-1. Non-SEC head coaches. Give me Dan Lanning. Give me Dan Lanning. This is going to sound very much like I'm just sipping the Georgia Kool-Aid, the Georgia assistant Kool-Aid, which I kind of am, I guess. Not the most accomplished coach. We're going to get to coaches in this draft, this 5 versus 5, 10 total coaches draft that are more accomplished than Dan Lanning. I almost went with a guy that I have at number 2 on my board, but here's why I didn't. It's one thing to go 10-3 year one. They then had 34 guys transfer off of that Oregon roster. They had 6 guys get drafted. That's half the roster, half of your scholarship players that you're turning over going into year 2. Plus, you lost your prized OC, Kenny Dillingham, who gets the Arizona State head coaching job. And then, just like that, you get better. You have a 12-win season. Everybody's saying in conference championship weekend, you have a chance to win a national championship. Of course, Washington happens, but still, that is a great place to be for a year 2 coach. All we have seen Dan Lanning do since that turnover that he had, he signed a top 4 recruiting class and a top 3 portal class. That is incredible, top of the line, elite stuff. Some of the in-game stuff still makes me a little bit nervous where I'm like, is that really the 4th down call that we're going with? Deep in your own territory, not crazy about that decision. That's going to come with time. We used to say that stuff about Kirby too. We used to say that a lot with Kirby. And I think that's just a guy on a high-profile job who needs more of those reps as a head coach. He will get better with that. If he's not better in like 3 or 4 years, then we can talk about that being a true thing that's holding him back from being great. But I think the guy can develop. I think he can win with moving pieces. I think he can do so more consistently than his predecessor, who, by the way, Mario Cristobal only has 1 top 15 finish in his career. Dan Lanning already has 2. Okay? Dan Lanning is the real deal, and he's 22-2 against coaches that aren't Kalen DeBoer.
Yeah. Okay. This is why I love talking about this stuff with you, because I think there's one guy alone in a tier by himself who's not in the SEC, and you didn't draft him. That is Mike Norvell.
He was 2. Yep. I have no problem whatsoever with Norvell coming off this early. Yeah.
Yep. I think that he is probably landing in a couple of years, but he's done it. I think he came into a worse situation. I mean, we're talking about a dumpster fire that FSU was. There's not a coach in college football that could say, I took a team from, the outhouse to the penthouse like this. I mean, he comes in, it's FSU is, you're an ACC school, you don't have the money, you're in Clemson's shadow, you're in Florida's shadow, you're starting to be in Miami's shadow. Jimbo left you, Jameis is not coming back, nobody's walking through that door. This dude comes in there and redefines how the transfer portal can be used. He gets guys that are like, I mean, if you look at the guys he got out of the transfer portal, it's like, first came from where? Do they have a football team? You look at, why am I blanking on the quarterback? He cooked us twice.
Jordan
Travis, it's like, oh, he was a Louisville. Yeah, he was trash. He was not any good at Louisville. So acted like he was this finished product, a la even Jaden Daniels isn't true. So, yeah, I think that if you put him at our theoretical Texas A&M, he's going to have them competing in a year or 2.
I had Norvell at 2 on my board. Going 13-0 is, I mean, look, the ACC was down, yeah, but we should not take that for granted. Like, and if you want to throw the Georgia thing back at me, Bear Bryant, Nick Saban, Bill Belichick.
He's not gotten smashed by Georgia once or twice, okay?
But it wouldn't have made a difference. No matter who was on that sideline, Georgia was going to dominate that game with all the opt-outs. And you could say, like, oh, it's a reflection of Norvell. It's kind of a reflection of the circumstances, stuff like that. The vast majority of other programs in college football, and don't tell me that Georgia was in the exact same situation as Florida State, okay? They were not. In terms of the undefeated stuff and then getting left out, that way was different than the way that Georgia get left out. Georgia fans, don't get mad at me for saying this. You would have been very upset if your team had gotten left out after being undefeated. But I think that Norvell is an interesting case and a guy that not only turns it around, but like shows that he's the guy. Because for a bit there, it was, is this Willie Taggart 2.0? Like that. Yeah. There were some really, really rough times. And, let's not forget about early on with him. The Black Lives Matter movement, when that happened in 2020, there was no buy-in whatsoever. There was a mix-up with the communication and all that stuff and the way that went down. And there was he had like a mutiny on his hands. It was like, is this guy going to get people that want to show up and play for him? And even, some of the early struggles they had, and obviously 22, they turned it around. I've been very high on Norvell for a bit, so I was a little bit more optimistic. But that's also because I've been going on Memphis radio with my guys, Greg and Eli, for like 6 years now. And they've been because obviously Norvell, was a big part of getting Memphis to some new heights as well, getting them to a New Year's Six Bowl. He's elevated 2 programs. And that's That's legit. He could very well be the best non-SEC coach in the country. I won't push back on anything. The only thing that prevented me, from putting him at number one on the big board, he hasn't had that roster turnover where he's had to truly like work with a new group of guys year to year in the way that I think Lanning actually kind of had to. I know he still had Bo Nix, but like they were,
But he still had Bo Nix in itself as a credit to Lanning, because he still had Bo Nix used to not be a good thing.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. And Bo Nix with yet another new offensive coordinator, and you had to hire the right guy. Yeah, literally his fifth offensive coordinator.
Or I guess I said that. No, that's not a joke, is it? Yep, correct.
No, it is his fifth, isn't it? Because was Dillingham there? And gosh, now I'm getting my dates mixed up. Whatever, fifth different offensive coordinator. That's what Bo Nix had. But yeah, you realize Norvell was only 34 when he was hired at Memphis.
It's wild. Yeah, he's another one of those guys. You bring up a great thing about Memphis. Led them to the New Year's Six bowl game. I mean, yeah, it's crazy what he's done. Now this next pick is why I said I need to specify what type of program I'm running here, because this is a read option. If you gave me one answer, I would have taken one guy. Another answer, I'm going to take this guy. You're going to laugh at this answer, but I wouldn't get him later. Ryan Day. I'm going to get Ryan Day right now, and here's the reason why. Ryan Day has coached his entire career with expectations.
Yep.
Okay. And I think that again, it's not Memphis, right? We're talking about our theoretical university, Texas A&M or whatever. I know that if we could they probably try. If they could mutiny him over there, your floor is now 9-10 wins, right? You know that he is going to recruit. You know that he'll embarrass you in losing the worst teams because he has the best roster in America, right? But that just speaks to his ability to hoard talent. Now, can he win the big game? No. But which active coach has? They're all SEC coaches and Jim Harbaugh. That guy's gone. We can't draft him, I'm assuming. So that's the thing. It's like, yeah, the knock on him is he can't win big games. It's fair, and I slander him more than anyone. But if Brian Kelly retired tomorrow and LSU hired Ryan Day, I'd be like, you know what? Cool.
Yeah, you would talk yourself into it. I had him at 3 on my big board as well. And for those who are going to push back on that,
of our non-SEC big board.
Yes, non-SEC big board.
Before we get on a graphic here. Right?
Yep. I'm taking Brian Kelly over Ryan Day.
Right.
Maybe that puts me in the minority. I'd probably take Sark over Ryan Day. But look, it's still a 5-year run in which the guy's 53-8. And as much as I love to say a good coach elevates the program, it is tough to elevate Ohio State. It is tough to elevate Alabama. You're not working with the same set of circumstances that Mike Norvell took over, that even Dan Lanning took over at Oregon, and he has elevated that job as well. It's not just the Michigan stuff anymore with Ryan Day. The question with him, because like this was his first meh quarterback and really his most meh year that he's had at Ohio State, which was losing in a New Year's Six bowl.
Yep.
My question with Day is whether we're watching the 2020s version of Larry Coker, or if this is like a back against the wall 2015 Dabo season, and all of a sudden he's off. And he's like, okay, I've figured some things out. I tend to think it's not the latter, just because the Michigan stuff, like the way that's prolonged, that's usually not the best sign for an Ohio State head coach long term to lose 3-0 to Michigan. But I don't necessarily have a problem with him coming off of the board here. The Ohio State standard is so unbelievably high.
Yep.
And I think he's perfectly fine to come off the board with your second pick.
Yeah, and like, see, now you're seeing how I view fantasy sports, right? Like, I'm drafting Atlanta Falcons. You know what I'm saying? Like, I take my own biases out of this. You know, we had the whole segment about is Ohio State the team to beat. I was slandering him the entire time. But at the end of the day, if you want to take all the SEC off the board and look at the accolades and the year in and year out success, like if Texas A&M had the success that Ohio State has had over the time right there, you would be seeing so much gig'em all over these boards, buddy. It would be over with.
I do think Ryan Day actually has a decent amount of self-awareness, at least in terms of personnel type decisions. I don't always think like going after Lou Holtz, that's not self-aware. That was not. That was a swing and a miss. But in terms of the personnel decisions, every time I've seen him make a big move, like I loved that Jim Knowles hire. I thought that was such a great move for a guy that could have said, oh, you know what? We were right there. We were X amount of plays away from playing for a national championship or doing that whole thing. We don't need to redo our defensive staff. He's like, no, we weren't good enough. And we're going to go pay this guy like, $2 million to come be our DC. And Jim Knowles has actually been really good on that side of the ball. And the move to bring in Chip Kelly, like,
honestly love that move. Well, okay, again, saved himself here because he initially wanted Bill O'Brien, but that guy's not going to coach you down. Sure. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because that doesn't matter for this. You put the Chip Kelly one as long as he coaches it down. And then before that, it was Shiano, which was a fine decision at the time. Didn't end up working out, but it was great for recruiting. And then you pivot and go, yeah, okay, we get why we got Shiano. Kind of like his version of Bo Pelini, right? It's like, okay, well, now let's get the cool guy who's actually a great schematic guy. Yeah.
Shiano was on staff for Urban, though, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's the other thing, too, is he underratedly actually inherited kind of a bad situation, to be devil's advocate here, because you never want to be the guy who follows the guy, like we talked about. I mean, and Urban Meyer also creates chaos in his wake. Like, who's the wide receiver coach that has the podcast, the Menace 2 guy?
I mean, I can't, don't make me say his name on these.
I know, right. Please so don't. that's what he took over. Like, it was Ohio State coming off of a championship, but also when you look back at it, a pretty unwinnable situation that he actually was able to keep afloat at least.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, there will be people that push back on that. I'm a little bit tortured on this next pick. You know why I'm tortured.
Mm-hmm.
Do I take the move that'll make smart football people go, yep, Connor knows what he's doing? Or do I make the move that's a little bit more obvious? What do I do, Will? What do I do? You know what? All right, let's go for it. I'm going to go with Dabo. Let's go with Dabo.
Okay.
Dabo is a guy that obviously we know his flaws. I don't need to sit here and tell you about how obvious they have been in the 2020s. He has been one of these guys that has not done our adapt or die. I think even if you look at the comments that he's made about high school recruiting, and that's where we're going to hang our hat, that's where we feel like we can still win at a high level, he's actually really fallen off in that area. Like 14th in the country, 15th in the country, 15th in the country during the NIL era, which is kind of an indictment. And it's not that Clemson hasn't embraced NIL. They have like this beautiful state-of-the-art NIL related facility on campus. Like, there's no doubt that they're taking care of their guys. It's just done so in a different way, and it's not talked about in the way that some of these other places do it. So I won't necessarily sit here and fault him for that, pretend that he's a dinosaur for that. But when you're doing that at the high school level and you're losing 10 to 12 guys per year in the portal, it's a one-way street still. It doesn't really set you up for great success. Now, the floor is still so high. I mean, like, he came up short of 10 wins this past season for the first time since 2010. Like, that is a long time. Think of how many programs would kill for a 10-win season at this level, and how few and far between those can feel at times. Even at Tennessee during the decade of dysfunction. I mean, there is so much to be said for the floor and the peak that he has had. And yes, I am paying a little bit for past performances probably by taking him this high, and I'm admitting that. But you can do worse than Dabo. I mean, you can do so much worse than Dabo. And if there were a lot, if this is an SEC draft and SEC coaches are included, Dabo's probably getting undrafted if we're doing 10. Right?
I don't know. I mean, okay. So as you're saying, it's like, hey man, again, like I know you're talking about past, I know that, but you're talking about 2 national championships smacking Nick Saban.
There's 5 national championships that have been won by active coaches. He's got
like literally. It's like at some level you have to understand. Again, if we're talking about Texas A&M and you bring this guy, because here's the deal: what he needs is a bag man. He needs like an NIL guy, like a personnel guy who could just bring guys in. It Clemson, he's done a great job building them up, but they're not a money program and they never will be. It's Clemson, South Carolina. So if you move him to an Ohio State or to an A&M, I actually would argue his floor is raised because you have people respond. You think Jimbo Fisher was in there like doing the math on NIL deals? No.
Jimbo didn't even know that they had NIL. He didn't know that they
that's what I'm saying.
No.
But even that situation, you know?
Yeah. Look, it's a tricky thing because anything with Dabo feels either too too respectful or too disrespectful,
Right.
if we're being honest.
Yeah.
So I'll bite the bullet. He is my second pick. Third pick, back to you.
Okay. Let's see. So there's a couple of ways I could go here.
Yes, there
I
is.
think either one that I'm really considering would kind of like, I'm not gonna say upset you, but I think I'm gonna take the guy. I'm gonna take the guy who I think that you would like the most, and that's Whittingham. I'm.
No, are you kidding? I almost just took him. I thought
I
I'd get him
know.
back on the other. Oh,
I know.
dude,
I know. That's why you're seeing how I play fantasy sports because
oh.
I wouldn't have him here on the board, but I know this is the only place I can get him. I think that what he has done at Utah, he is one of the true last of a dying breed guys who has been at the same place forever. He has been innovative on both sides of the ball. He continues to find diamonds in the rough and beat power programs. He continues to hang with Ohio State. He continues to give USC a run for their money. You look back at RIP the Pac-12, their recent champions. It's him and a bunch of basically like rich universities. You know what I'm saying? Universities with more than him. And I think that if you're looking for a guy to level up, right, you could talk about, him having a certain resonance in the area of Utah and why that works for him. But I again go, if you give that guy resources, he's already beating the teams with resources. He's like if Kalen DeBoer had stayed there, you know what I'm saying? He's like kind of that type of thing where it's like he was successful early. This is the guy, he technically, I guess, has a national championship if you want to count that one. But going wait, because they actually went back and retroactively claimed that one. So that's the thing. Like he in that world, beat Nick Saban. He did all that. Yeah, the 09 one where they beat Saban. Or the 08 one. Oh wait, it was the 09 bowl game, but it was in 08.
That's officially. You're sure Utah claimed that one?
I saw a graphic the other day that they put out. Let's see.
NCAA does not acknowledge that. NCAA.
Yeah, no. I know. That's why I laughed at it because I was like, huh? Because it's pretty rare that a team will go back and do that. We'll get back to that. But point being, yeah, like he has that. Yeah, I mean, actually, it's on there anyway. So I'll get back to it and like really, really confirm it. See it's on the press releases and stuff. But point being, like he's beaten Saban. He's done that stuff. He's beaten new waves of coaches have come in and come out, and they've been the hot button, and yet he has beat all of them. I think that, like I said, you look at the draft picks, you look at the different styles of quarterbacks he's had. Another guy who took over for Urban Meyer, like he's been in all these different situations. The conferences have changed, and he's just been the one constant. So if I want, if I want like what's it called? Gosh, he was there for a while before that too. Yeah,
before that.
Yeah, like I want to say like only 64, but it feels like he still has some great football to coach ahead of him. You know what I'm saying? And so, yeah, I mean, he's recently won Coach of the Year awards. He recently won the back-to-back conference championships. So he's actually weirdly kind of coaching his best football right now, being in the job since like 05. So yeah, I think that he's pretty much set it and forget it. Like if you have a struggle, like he would be a great fit weirdly at like a Miami, where it's like you need consistency. You need a guy who can get in there and run his playbook until you figure something else out. Kind of like what UCF did with Gus. I think he would be perfect for a job like that, where it's like, we're going to raise this floor so high that we're never going to embarrass you again, because you don't really watch Utah get embarrassed unless it's against like a generational player,
College football fans know that Utah's got a better home atmosphere than Miami, and it's not even particularly close.
Oh, yeah. Not even close. I mean, yeah, your backyard's a better atmosphere than Miami.
Thank you. I'm so upset. I'm so upset. He was next on my board. I almost picked him just now. I think that he's the most underrated coach in America. I do. 11 seasons with 9 wins at Utah. They did that 5 times in program history before he took over for Urban. Whittingham was actually on staff for 4 of those seasons. So 15 of 16 times that Utah won 9 games, he was there. That is crazy. You talk about Miami. Part of the reason why Miami frustrates me so much is because when the Canes joined the ACC, they were the team that faded with increased competition. There were other things that went into that. It wasn't just as simple as joining the ACC, although I think that's kind of where a lot of their problems lie and where a lot of their poor decision-making kind of came from. But I still think that you look at Utah and what they did to leave the Mountain West, join the Pac-12. And initially you go through those struggles, and it takes a little bit to be able to get going to elevate that level of play that it takes. But then you get back to being the team that we saw be so good in the Mountain West. only one losing season in the Pac-12 in the playoff era. Their floor is really, really high. His teams are tough. They're physical. They're a bit of a throwback. It'll be interesting to see kind of how that fits in with the Big 12. It hasn't necessarily been known to be the identity of the Big 12, but kind of identity of that conference feels like it's changing. There's a bit of that shift right now, and Utah is definitely at the forefront of that shift. But man, they've consistently been able to win. They have such a defined identity, and it's a hard thing to do that at a place where you're not recruiting top 25 classes on a consistent basis. That's just not been their MO.
Going back to our previous conversation, let me just read you ahead and get a subhead from the Salt Lake Tribune. 2018 dateline. NCAA gives the 08 Utes credit as national champions. Computer ranking placed unbeaten Utah above BCS winner Florida. So in 2018, their 2008 championship became legitimate, according to the NCAA.
2008 championship became legitimate. That is a look. I don't think the NCAA on their official website has that, though. That's my point.
That's what I'm telling you. In 2018, they added it. Again, what is the NCAA focused on? The wrong stuff all the time. This is what they were focused on that week.
Okay, I need to look this up because there's no I feel like I've looked at this list 1,000 times.
Well, and I checked on it a couple of times after it happened, and then I was like, okay, well that whatever, like doesn't matter. And then boom, right after the UCF thing, they were just like, we're just gonna really rub it in for you guys and give them this championship.
Okay, so NCAA website does not have 2008 Utah. It has just Florida. The last shared national championship was obviously 2003 with LSU and USC.
They got to, you know what? Now we're doing Utah championship. I'm mad for no reason. Let's move on.
You're driving me nuts. All right, we got the selection that I have instant regret over not picking Kyle Whittingham. That was a mistake. So now I'm going to take the guy that if this guy wasn't on my board, I was going to tell myself that I lost the draft no matter what.
Okay.
Give me Lance Leipold.
That was the other guy.
Lance Leipold is a guy that has been a fixture of college football for more time than a lot of people care to realize, because if you live in the Midwest, you probably know Wisconsin Whitewater and the power that they were back in the day. And yes, obviously that doesn't make you necessarily a great coach at this level to be able to do that. But the job that he did at Buffalo, then to get the Kansas job, the fact that he is still doing what he's doing at Kansas. The man just won 9 games at Kansas. Okay.
Yeah.
He went to consecutive bowl games at Kansas. I don't know that there are more than 5 people in all of college football that can do that. I really don't. You talk about being the perfect person for that job. He very much was. The only other time in the history of Kansas football in which they went to consecutive bowl games was 07-08. He showed up in 21. They had 12 wins in 7 seasons in the playoff era before that. Like, that's just total wins. As a Power 5 program, you're losing these games to like Coastal Carolina and these games that are supposed to be money games for you. Kansas couldn't even win those. They were so unbelievably bad before he arrived. They were 4-58 in Big 12 play in the playoff era. That is so bad. Well, like Kansas in the beginning of the Leipold era, we're searching for multiple Big 12 wins in a season for the first time since 2008, my freshman year of college. You want to talk about walking into basura situations.
Yep.
There is no more basura situation than the one that Lance Leipold walked into at Kansas. He has 9 Big 12 wins in 3 years, which is a compliment. That is hard to do. They had 7 Big 12 wins in the previous 12 seasons. It speaks to him that he was willing to stay there and not just leave immediately after he gets that 9-win season. And who knows, maybe he's gone after this year. I would not necessarily fault him for that. I think that Kansas football job probably ages you in dog years. So I'm just going to multiply whatever his end of Kansas run season total is by 7. I have no problem doing that. People forget, even in that first year when they sucked, they had 2021 Oklahoma on the ropes. You remember that game? Caleb Williams is out there, and he's got to like put on his cape and save Oklahoma. Kansas is inviting fans to come into the stadium mid-game. That's the Lance Leipold effect.
And then he came back and he finished the job.
Then,
you know what, Oklahoma? I wasn't done.
Yeah. But I think he is absolutely tremendous. probably lasted maybe even a little bit too long on this board, to be honest with you. So I feel very good about my third pick.
Yeah, that was the thing. I was like, either I take Leipold and you take Whittingham, or I upset you and I take Whittingham and you take Leipold, which is funnier. Yeah, so gosh, man, this next one is like a real crossroads because we're starting to get with the guys who are like have the resume, right? Or guys that I just think would be a good fit at our theoretical university. And yeah, there's one guy that like I feel like might not have the resume, but if you really think about it, I think he's kind of in the conversation with these last couple of guys we've taken. Jeff Brom.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Go on. I like Jeff Brom.
And he's a guy, like, probably could have gotten him later, but I do, like, this is a guy I do want to kind of, like, hype up. Because, again, you look at what he did at Purdue, right? They were not exactly going to say in the dumpster, but it felt like their early days were ahead.
Well, they were in the dumpster. That is very fair to say. They were basura before Jeff Brom arrived.
Yeah, and I know we have a lot of, I'd say Purdue connections, but they're right. I mean, I felt like their glory days were behind them. You know what I'm saying? Like when they were on that high-flying offense with Breeze and everything, it was like, well, that was cute, that was great. Now this is like big boy football. You guys just don't have a place here, right? And to his credit, when you talk about big wins, you know what I'm saying? When you talk about his fist is 4-3 against the top 10 since 2018.
Ohio State?
Insane. Yep.
It's like the Rondale Moore game of 2018 is an all-timer. Go back and watch that clip. He made like the entire Buckeye defense miss in space. That was a legendary night in the history of Purdue football that Jeff Brom was a part of.
Exactly. And like that's my thing. It's like you really can build the perfect coach here. It's like the joke I tell about with like Alabama and Florida's coaching staff. I got Ryan Day for the recruiting of the regular season. I got Jeff Brom, who whoops Ryan Day. And so, that's the type, you kind of have two archetypes of coaches, right? It's like, again, like, when you go into the market, it's like you're going to take your, your Brian Kelly or your Lincoln Riley, the guys that have kind of done it before, but not quite. Or you're going to take a guy like a Jeff Brom, who is like, what would he do with resources? I'm horrified to ask. Like, honestly, if you think about how he's gone from Purdue to now Louisville, that's what it really like gets to be, right? Where it's like, okay, well, yeah, you're Purdue, you're doing whatever. When you go into Louisville, who was also in kind of a, like, they were in like a friends with benefits situation with like Satterfield, where it was like a mutual parting of ways.
Weird.
Like they were like, it was like they kind of, it wasn't a horrible situation or anything, but him coming home, him leaving his brother behind was pretty funny, and then we're kind of rejoining him. And so, point being, it's like, okay, you did it at Purdue. Okay, well, this is your alma mater. How are you gonna do? Boom, year one, just electric. And the other part of it is, been pretty good at recruiting. Got the running back that was like a 5-star. I'm sure he dropped a little bit after he committed to Louisville because that's how that game works. But like he's been able to like get talent down there. He's been able to get kind of the bigger name guys. So that's my thing. When I think about a guy who you can kind of plant a seed and project them into the next level, right? That's what I see. It's like, what are you doing at each level? And for him, you really couldn't expect any better at Purdue. You couldn't expect any better at Louisville. And like, I mean, I'm trying to think back. What was his name? Michael Bush back in the day. That was the last time I remember Louisville really being this type of team. Not quite the Jeff Brom era, right? But a little bit like I remember being young and like seeing Louisville and being like, that's a cool team. They got the Cardinal, they got the Black. Lamar Jackson's teams weren't good. They were teams with Lamar Jackson on them. There was not another player who I was scared of on those teams, and you'd see, I mean, LSU beat Lamar Jackson in a bowl game. So that was not a good Louisville team. That was a team with Lamar Jackson on it. So I think that like this is the best this program has done that I can really remember. They're in an amazing place. He's going to be there for a long time, and they have their guy. And when you can find that type of guy, I think it's really rare.
I don't think there is anyone who compares to the late Mike Leach. Okay, I want that on the record. I don't think there is ever going to be someone that makes us stop and truly go, that guy's just like Mike Leach. Even his disciples, even if someone says weird, off-the-wall things, there was only one Mike Leach.
Yep.
But if there is ever a coach who is going to embody some of the swing your sword characteristics and do things with a kind of Leach-like path, it's Jeff Brom. Like, he kind of fits a lot of that. I'm not saying that from a schematic standpoint it's similar, although obviously like his offenses, they throw the football a ton and they are not shy about that. When the personnel lines up, that's what they like to be able to do. But Brom is someone that is elevated two programs. Now, again, we can get carried away sometimes with the year one coaches, and sometimes the cupboard isn't quite as bare as what we think it is. It's a question that we're going to get to with Alex Golesh as well, talking about year one coaches and whether or not to judge them. But Brahm is someone that I have great respect for, not just because he's a Cub fan, but he is someone that was a devastating loss at Purdue.
Yep.
You know that you are a coveted coach when the fan base that you leave is crushed.
Yep.
Arkansas fans right now feeling that with Eric Musselman.
Yeah.
You're like, hey, it was only 5 years, but man, it's tough. That's a brutal pill to have to swallow that he left us and that we weren't his destination job. That's how Purdue fans felt when Jeff Brom ultimately went back to his alma mater, because I thought it was going to happen after Petrino, and then it ended up not happening. And Purdue fans were like, oh, bullet dodge, but then it didn't. And then he ends up still going to Louisville in time. Great coach, though. Great coach. Did not have him this high on my board. Was a little bit lower. So I'm okay with you taking him there. Let's go with I can go in a couple of directions with this. Let's go Luke Fickell. Let's get Luke Fickell.
Yeah.
Kind of on the back burner right now. If we're doing this draft 2 years ago, he does not last this long. There's just no way. He's probably top 3 or top 4 pick if we're doing a non-SEC coach draft post 2021. But I mean, think about it. Who's the only group of 5 program, or who's the only coach rather, to lead a group of 5 program to a 4-team playoff berth? It's Luke Fickell. That's going to be the entire list. We will probably forget that a few years from now, because Cincinnati obviously going to the Big 12, in the Big 12 now already and Fickell being at Wisconsin, that'll kind of get lost, just that how rare that achievement really was as we transition to the 12-team playoff. We don't judge year one coaches, so I won't go too far into what Fickell has done at Wisconsin. I do like the creativity to be willing to shake up the offense and not just say, well, this is what you've done the last 2 decades at Wisconsin with a Barry Alvarez like ground and pound offense, and we're going to go out and get Phil Longo. I kind of like that he was willing to do something like that, to shake things up, do things his way. But I have no problem just kind of defaulting to what he did at Cincinnati to say this guy is an excellent coach. He had a 2-year stretch in which the only people he lost to were Kirby Smart on a last-second field goal and Nick Saban in a playoff game.
And there's a very notable coach that he beat in there, Brian Kelly.
People forget that. It's a really good 21 Cincinnati team. Just an awesome team that had tons and tons of NFL talent. I mean, think about this. The 22 team that Cincinnati had post-playoff berth, right? They were, I think, bottom 10 in the country in percentage of returning production because they had 9 guys drafted from Cincinnati.
Yep.
Okay? That is crazy development. Luke Fickell is awesome. And he is going to be somebody at Wisconsin that I think if there is ever a guy that can take Wisconsin to those heights, to break through that ceiling that they have very much had throughout the 21st century, a good ceiling, but it's been a ceiling nonetheless. I think it's him. I think that guy's awesome. Oh yeah, went 9-3 in 22, by the way, with a team that had that much turnover. He's very good.
Yeah, so to your point, I have a ton of respect for Luke Fickell in that, okay, you're a defensive coach, right? You are at Ohio State, you get shellacked by these weird tattoo allegations. You got to be the only, struggling Ohio State coach as the interim after that whole thing. You get stuck with that. Well, now it's time for them to name a head coach, and buddy, it's not you, it's Ryan Day, right? So that servitude that didn't matter. You got passed over, right?
You're saying post Urban.
Yeah, because obviously, you would think if you're him, okay, well, Urban, you're right. It's later on, but it's like it makes sense to hire Urban Meyer when you're in that situation. That was never his job. He was a placeholder. But after that, you're going to hire a former assistant? Oh, it's going to be Ryan Day. Okay. Whereas Luke Fickell had already, been there. He'd been through the wars. He'd had to wear that with Ohio State, and I always felt like that was a little bit messed up that he didn't get farther in that process.
Ryan Day was already there, though. That's the thing. It's like Ryan Day is this internal hire, so he's like,
no, you're right. You're right. It's just
so it's like the Lincoln Riley thing in Oklahoma, kind of.
Yeah. I'm just saying. I wish he had had the opportunity to go deeper in the process is all I'm saying, because obviously that Ohio State is where he played, just like Marcus Freeman in a way. Like he had the ability to really be a version of that, right? So that's all I'm saying. And how he responded is being in Cincinnati, staying in Ohio. And I do want to say this, all of this fits together, right? Because his offensive coordinator at Cincinnati, Denbrock, right? So if you look at the offense they ran with Ritter it looks a ton like the first year of Jaden Daniels, right? Where it's a lot of that shotgun, that personnel, a little bit of that motion, read option, all that different stuff, right? So to be a defensive coach, okay, you get the guy with a little bit of the Cincinnati ties, same like Brian Kelly coaching tree, you make the playoff. Okay, boom. So that type of football, as we saw, kind of lends itself to be complementary. You get the Wisconsin job, and they are used to defensive football. They are used to hard-nosed, all this stuff. An adapt or die, the guy that would not adapt would go, well, I got hired at Wisconsin. I don't even really need to play offense anymore. These guys are not used to it. I'm going to go hire, some pro-style guy. I'm going to coach the defense, so it's never going to be my fault. I'm going to – and I could go point just like at Iowa and be like, well, that's not – well, I guess that is his fault because his son. But you could say, okay, well, that's totally his fault, actually. Never mind. So point B, you could just go have the scapegoat guy who's just kind of a plant that is, you're going to struggle in year one. You know that it's going to be that, but you can coach a defense. So you can say, look, this isn't my fault. Our defense is great. Well, to your point, he goes up and he hires Phil Longo, which is a completely different offensive system than Denbrock. It lends itself to, that's the Drake May offense that put him on the map. Not last year, obviously, because he was at Wisconsin, but the year that Drake May was lighting it up and in the Heisman conversation, that was Phil Longo. And so point being, it's cool to say, hey, I'm this young coach. I've been passed over. I had to go to Cincinnati. What did I do there? Well, I beat Brian Kelly, Cincinnati legend, right, with Mike Denbrock, who we cast off into the woods. Okay, well, now I'm going to go to Wisconsin. Okay, again, getting Desmond Ridder drafted, not being me, that guy's not an NFL quarterback. Look at how many games he started because of how good they made him look, right? So, boom, then you go to Wisconsin, you say, well, I know this offense works, but I want to do better than that. I know that if I run this offense here with this personnel, it's going to be an easier transition because I just ran it. It plays more complementary football. He's like, no, dude, whatever. I'm going to go run a version of the air raid. Nothing's really the air raid anymore, right? But I'm going to run a version of it. I'm going to have Tanner Mordecai slinging it all over the field. And I respect that so much because he's not worried about 2023. He's worried about 2026. He's worried about what's this going to look like when it is good. Not, let me save my butt. Let me be safe. Let me be a defensive coach. Let me be this hard-nosed guy, right? I love him.
You know what's interesting? Now you talk about being passed over once for that job. Look, I don't want to assume I know what a specific coach's dream job is. Ohio State is a destination job through and through. There's no doubt about it. If that job comes open again, and if Ryan Day gets fired after this year, I'm just saying hypothetically speaking, how high on that list is Luke Fickell? What does that look like? Because obviously maybe some of it depends on, okay, do you get Wisconsin to a 10-2 regular season or something like that? Maybe they're competing for a spot in the 12-team playoff. Are you, sitting there at 7 or 8 wins and it's kind of like, well, he really hasn't shown that he can do it at this level quite yet in this conference. So let's hold off. But it will be an interesting conversation that I'm sure a lot of Ohio State fans would be very divided on if Fickell, were one of those candidates that were discussed. Because the second that were to happen, if Ryan Day is fired, immediately the list of candidates would have to include Luke Fickell. He's too good of a coach not to be considered.
But no, at Ohio State, they would either hire Brian Hartline or Marcus Freeman, and he would just march in there in Wisconsin with an undefeated team and beat the snot out of them. I'm not good enough for you guys.
Marcus Freeman burned some bridges maybe with some of those pre-2022 comments. I'm just saying, just throwing it out there is interesting, going after your former school's education. But okay, so we have one more pick apiece. Yeah. This is your last pick. Who do you want to end your draft board with?
Oh my gosh. I hated that I'm here.
I know what you're picking. Just pick him. Just pick him.
No, you don't know who I'm picking because you're going to be shocked by either of these guys. First off, let me ask, who do you think I'm picking?
Based on that response? Based on what you were
No, before I said that, who did you think I was picking?
I thought you were picking James Franklin.
That's one of them.
Yep. And I know
you know what, man? I'm going to do it. I'm going to take James Franklin. Right. And the reason why is I was between him and Lincoln Riley, and I think I hate Lincoln Riley more. I'm going to be honest with you. As much as I don't like James Franklin, I think there was one man I don't like more than him, and I can't have both of them and Ryan Day. I think that okay, so you got to start at Vanderbilt.
you know what you do. You do. And
you do.
As much as I hate on many of the things that James Franklin is about, the Vanderbilt part is a very important piece of his story and why he is so respected and why he is a guy that is always going to show up high on these lists. Because if we're going to talk about Lance Leipold being one of the few guys in the country to win Big 12 games at a place like Kansas, we have to talk about that in the same way with James Franklin at Vandy.
Yes. And I mean, the thing that's so maddening about James Franklin is he's 95% of the way there. And all it takes is a Joe Moorhead to put him over the top. All it takes is that type of an offensive mind. Because last year, his defense, I mean, you'd be hard-pressed to find a defense, even in Iowa, better than him. We talk about what Manny Diaz did. You talk about Chop Robinson was his name?
Chop Robinson. Yeah, didn't play in the bowl game, but considered to be, first-round pick.
Yeah, and like you talk about like how they get these guys, and the thing that's crazy and underrated about Penn State is the recruiting, right? I mean, this is a guy who's consistently gotten those like top 50, top 100 players, gotten some 5 stars here and there, and not just the guys like Shorter, like some actual real impact guys, right? And so point being, like, I think it's kind of underrated how Penn State has been. It's been a team with, it's had some glory to it, and that is a little bit tainted given the circumstances surrounding that, but it's never really been a destination. It's never really been a place like a USC or an Alabama or an Ohio State. And the fact that he has been able to be in kind of this weird, like, I don't know. I hate to call it the golden age of the Big Ten because it's really been like lately it's just been Michigan and Ohio State, but there has been good Wisconsin teams, great Wisconsin teams. There's been great Iowa teams that went undefeated for a long while. There's been some real players in the Big Ten. It's not been a one-team conference. It's not like running a rough shot through the Big 12, for instance, right? So I think the fact that he has been able to keep them competitive every year, their floor is super high. And exactly to your point about like, at Vanderbilt, like if you look at how that place has gone since he left, goodness. I mean, yeah, you can talk about some of the NIL stuff, but that's recent, okay? The Derek Mason stuff where they just didn't win a game, like that was the same kind of situation that he was in, and he was able to really make Vandy into a formidable team, and maybe the last time we'll ever see them be one, unfortunately, and that's he's always going to have that as his biggest thing. But part of that is, the win over Ohio State, the way that he was able to be in that conversation it was 2016, right?
2016 was the Penn State team that won the Big Ten championship, played against USC in the Rose Bowl. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. And like the way that it was so frustrating is, again, like I hate to just be, I know it's like the bit that we're the Joe Moorhead podcast, but that team with Saquon Barkley, that team with what's
Chris
his name?
Godwin, we had Mike Gesicki, we had Trace McSorley. Yep. I mean, the receivers coming there, Robinson, like those dudes, that is a stacked team. That's why the modern version of it is so frustrating, because you look up and down these rosters year in and year out, and you're like, you guys could be, if you were a Lance Leipold type coach, you guys could beat Ohio State every year if you wanted to. And so that's the thing. It's that he has this process that has gotten him this far. And it's hard to fault him for not shifting it and doing the fickle, because that might end up in a 4 or 5 loss season. You never know. But he has at least made Penn State respectable, if not predictable, right? Like when they had the game against Michigan this year, you more or less knew how it was going to go. But if you're a Penn State alum, you got to look at yourself in the mirror and say, what do we really expect out of this team? New Year's Six Bowl. I think that's a really good barometer. He has had numerous of those. And Penn State, again, we want to talk about a bad situation, buddy. That's a fair point.
Yeah.
I just got to the place with Franklin where when it's 2017 or 2018 even, I think it was. Yeah. And he's standing up there at Big Ten Media Day still complaining about negative recruiting.
Yep.
And saying that Penn State's biggest competitors are still telling people that they're going to get bowl bans and stuff like that. I just don't like the excuses. I think the authenticity rubs me the wrong way. When I hear a story about a quarterback trying to schedule a meeting with his head coach, and the head coach tells the secretary, have him schedule an appointment. That stuff rubs me the wrong way.
Get a Zoom meeting.
What's that?
Get a Zoom meeting with your head coach.
Yeah.
On Outlook.
What are we doing here? Like, that's the type of stuff with Franklin that, look, I think he's worked through some of that stuff. I think he's had to mature and kind of take a look in the mirror at himself and say, what am I doing that's worth selling? What am I not worth doing? I think he is a little bit like a golden retriever in that he needs love and that he needs to always be told how good he is whenever these jobs open up. It's not a coincidence that his name is circulating for it. And then he comes back and says, well, I grew up in the state of Pennsylvania, and why would I want these jobs? Like, your name's getting floated out there for a reason. And it's not because you're genuinely interested. It's because you want to hear how much Penn State loves you. and you want to be able to get that contract. And he did, to his credit. And he has elevated the floor of Penn State, no doubt about it whatsoever. But I think we've gotten past the point where we consider James Franklin to be a top 6 or top 7 coach in the sport. We can move past that. I think and I hope we can. And there's a place for James Franklin's in the sport. There absolutely is. So I don't want to discredit him totally. He wasn't going to be on my board. He wasn't going to be on my board. Let's just say that. Okay.
And it's something really quick on him that does matter. And I'm not saying this as a consolation prize, but I mean, him and David Shaw are the 2 most successful black head coaches of our lives. And we had a conversation about that. Yeah. You could kind of get into the ever conversation with those 2 guys, with what they've done and how few truly great black head coaches there have been in college football. So yeah, it's guys' stories you can never really tell where that comes into play, how he's been treated at different places. But I do think that matters when you view kind of what you talk about. It's like it's been a different path for him. It just has been. So I think it's something that's worth respecting about him, is that at being a role model in that way, there aren't a ton of people that look like him at the top of the sport.
For sure. Absolutely. It's a very fair point. Okay. I could end with Lincoln Riley, but it's kind of better if I don't.
Okay.
If I end with Lincoln Riley, I'm the most accomplished. My board is just like the most accomplished board.
Yeah.
And that's not really what I'm going for. So I'm going to end with Jonathan Smith.
Love that.
I'm going to end with a guy that was easily, now looking back in hindsight, the best hire of the post 2017 coaching cycle. No questions asked. It's wild to think that he earned that title with all the big splashy hires that came, but there is no debate whatsoever. It's also kind of fitting now with the 2017 cycle that he is at a new school, because they all are not at the jobs that they were hired for.
Yep.
But he took his alma mater to an era that is really hard to get to at Oregon State. Consecutive top 25 seasons, at least at the time that he left there. I realized they fell out of the top 25 post-bowl game that he wasn't there for. But 3 consecutive winning seasons at Oregon State is tough.
Yep.
Really, really tough. It's sad that the entire reason he left his alma mater is driven by TV contracts. And that's it right there. But not in a way where he went to Murray State or something and he's going to a bigger program. It's like the dynamics of college football led to Jonathan Smith not being this better 2-decade-long feel-good story at that job and becoming what Kyle Whittingham has become at Utah, right? That's what I think Jonathan Smith could have been. And I realize the irony is that Kyle Whittingham went to BYU. He didn't go to Utah. So it's kind of like that's the rival there. But there is something that when he is getting that job at Michigan State, there is something that makes college football fans as a whole say, oh man, Michigan State just knocked that out of the park. That is such a smart move. And I realize that I defaulted to a couple of new Big Ten coaches on this list, but and I guess Dan Lanning now, another new Big Ten coach, weird thing to process. But I'm good with rounding out my board with Jonathan Smith, someone that I have tremendous respect for.
Yeah, I mean, all that needs to be said is he made Omar Speights look awesome. That guy sold me a bill of goods. He's the guy to be the greatest coach ever, because that dude showed up and he didn't play a meaningful down of football for LSU, and he was like a all Pac-12 selection under Jonathan Smith. So yeah, I mean, I think you're right there. It sucks because we should be talking about him as far as his heartwarming, awesome story, but the money is the money, and I think it's not fair to him to say, well, you got to go coach it. What unfortunately appears to be heading towards almost like an FCS level, especially with who we opened the program with today, right? And it's like, but I think that's super cool as far as, the sky's the limit for him. And again, Michigan State, another kind of a rough situation. So I think he's the right man for the job.
Definitely. It's amazing that we didn't pick Lincoln Riley. It's amazing. I mean,
is it?
It is and it isn't. Look, I think we all know that the shortcomings, especially on the defensive side of the ball, and as Michael Cass talked about the other day, the fact that you had this generational quarterback in Caleb Williams to have the season like he did after he won the Heisman and he was already established is going to be something that we definitely hold against him down the road. Any others that we should probably bring up? I almost brought up Chris Kleiman. I think Chris Kleiman is worthy of consideration. on
He
this
would have been
list.
my next up as well. He's good. I will say this on the Lincoln Riley thing. I literally, like I said, I was a hair's breadth because I needed a little bit more star power because I kind of had some guys in the middle that were like like a Braum, right? So I was like, I got to get another guy like that. And what's funny to me is you could really argue that Lincoln Riley's defense is worse than James Franklin's offense because at least I've seen James Franklin play good offense. I've never seen Lincoln Riley have a good defense. But yeah, I think Jed Fish is an interesting guy. Kleinman's an interesting guy. If I had the last pick, I would have taken Dion just to mess with you. I think, I think that I'm sure there's like some fan base that's like, oh, what you thinking about our guy? I mean, yeah, like I said, Fish at Washington is kind of in that next tier of like, we'll see,
Yeah, timing is everything because if we're doing this draft at this time last year, Sonny Dykes is coming off the board. Probably just
that's another guy. Yep.
I tend to think the one-offs are a little bit tougher, which right now he's more of a one-off than he is like a consistent winner at this level. Marcus Freeman is somebody that by this time next year, maybe we're putting him into that category, but it's still kind of like, if you haven't quite had that season as a head coach yet, it kind of makes you feel like, are you elevating? Have you gotten your program to that place that, people didn't think it can necessarily get to? I don't think
Marcus Freeman, he was set up to fail so badly, and I don't think people really understand it, which is that you talked about, okay, when a program loses their coach and they say, like, oh, dang it, like Notre Dame fans were so delulu that they were like, well, Marcus Freeman's better than our best coach ever, our winningest coach ever. Maybe not best coach, winningest coach ever. To put that type of pressure on like a first-time head coach that is his age, that again is a black head coach that plays at Notre Dame. Not going to talk about that anymore. But the fact that Brian Kelly had years and years and years and years and years of experience before Notre Dame, talking about Grand Valley State, Cincinnati, all that, and Marcus Freeman being anything less than Brian Kelly, it's like he's not the one out there talking all this mess. He's not the one comparing himself to Brian Kelly. He's not the one writing all the checks. The fans are doing that, right? So he's in such an unfair situation. But that being said, you're always going to take a step down when you lose a guy like that, unless you have some type of like DeBoer is a great example again, where it's like maybe this guy's the greatest coach we ever see. I don't know, but anything short of that is not Nick Saban.
Yeah, it's very difficult to kind of judge some of those guys. Who knows? This board could look very, very different next year. Could have probably also, honorable mention Kirk Ferentz, Mac Brown, older division of this group probably. I'm trying to think if there's anybody else that immediately jumps out. Like if you wanted to get, like we talking like a Willie Fritz or something like that, or certainly there's a lot of respect for the job that he did at Tulane, but I think I'm good with that though. I don't feel.
Oh, one guy that does deserve a mention though he doesn't deserve a draft place is David Braun. He was my lad of the week once this year. Again, first year head coach, but that situation was so horrible. Like you could even compare it like to some of the worst situations we've described here, where it's like, oh, you followed a legend who was coaching a bad team and didn't get fired because it was bad. He got fired because of a scandal. So the fact that they were able to, do what they did this year, win their bowl game, win 8 games, win coach of the year, I think that's really impressive. But again, the Sonny Dykes example, where it's like, I hate to be like, let's take that with a grain of salt, especially at Northwestern, right, where their best play was grow grass high before him. But you got to put 2 years together, especially in that weird. Oh my gosh. This is another one that I just like completely skipped my mind, and now I'm blanking on his name. Former Baylor, now Nebraska.
Matt Rule could have been on here.
Matt
as well.
Rule, yeah,
it could. Look, I think that there is great respect for the job that he did at Baylor. Yeah, I'm a little bit more wait and see than a lot of people with Nebraska. Okay.
Yeah.
I think that there is there is definitely something to be said for the buy-in that he absolutely gets and not really trying to hold as much of the NFL stuff against him.
Yeah.
And I do like a lot of the decisions early on that he has made in comparison to Scott Frost. But at the same time, when you hire Marcus Satterfield as your offensive coordinator, it makes me question everything.
Yeah. And then you beat out Kirby Smart on the recruiting trail, and I have no idea what to think.
That's a little bit different understanding the dynamics of being able to play immediately, I think, as well. There's stuff that goes into that.
I got out of here with 0 1-star reviews, and there it went.
Yeah,
all right.
There you go. All right, so here's what the boards end up looking like. Your board: Mike Norvell, Ryan Day, Kyle Whittingham, Jeff Brom, James Franklin. my board is Dan Lanning, Dabo Sweeney, Lance Leipold, Luke Fickell, Jonathan Smith. I think the casual college football fan likes your board. I think the diehard likes mine. I think the diehard
okay,
likes
I got Jeff Brom in there. All right, come on now.
Look, Jeff Brom, even the casual football fan knows let's play football, right?
Fair.
That's
actually a good point. Clip. They don't know from that, but they know him. Yeah, good point.
If you Google Jeff Brom GIF, I guarantee that's got to be the first thing that comes up, right?
Yeah.
Right. So maybe he's a little bit more well known in that area, but a good draft nonetheless. Yeah. This was fun. I love draft days.
Yes.
First Thursday every month, we're going to be able to do these. Let us know if you think our picks were absolutely terrible, which, look, I think our picks were great. I think all of our picks were awesome. No issue whatsoever. Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's kick it to Alex Golesh. Guy took over, speaking of guys who take over Basuro situations, 1-win program and takes over 7 wins just like that. Loved watching what the Bulls did this past year. So we talked about that, the impact of that Bama game, the momentum of the program, all that stuff, the on-campus stadium that's coming. So great stuff with him. Here's Alex. I'm now excited to be joined by a very special guest. It is USF coach Alex Golesh, repeat guest. Alex, I want to talk to you about the job that you did year one, but got to start with the question that I've been really wondering about for the last year since we chatted last on these airwaves. You said you were at about 4 hours of sleep in the early going to be able to get things up and running, make sure everything is good, to your standard. Are we up to 5 hours of sleep?
Yeah, I would say so. We're up to 5 in the off season here, where I think I got to make up for it a little bit was during spring break. So I just average it out through the year, and if we do take some time away, I just average those in. And I guess if you average all of that in, probably 5.
Okay, that's good. That's better than 4. 4 is you feel that. You can't that. That's not sustainable long term.
It catches up to you.
Yeah, it definitely does. I always respect the path that you took, and we talked about it last year, but just to be able to get this opportunity, born in Russia, first generation American, student assistant at Ohio State, worked your way up the last 20 years by being an assistant. How different was being the CEO of a program for you this first year?
Yeah, I think different just in the sense that you're constantly working on something, not that there was ever an end point in my previous life, but there's always something to do. And so I think that's probably the biggest adjustment. I think you quickly figure out what part of the job do I love, what part of the job do I have to do. And then you quickly figure out, man, how do I got to change my process? I'm so process oriented and so process driven that for me, it's almost like a game of how do I get this process better? It really is. And so, I think early on I figured out, man, you're going to get pulled a million different ways. You have to keep the most important thing every day. And man, I probably 2 months into the job, 2.5 months into the job, I had to force myself to wake up and tell myself what is the most important thing and go attack it. And, I think a year in now, or I guess a year and a half in, I still think it's the same. I think the most important thing is our players, and I know maybe sounds a little bit tacky, maybe sounds a little bit cliche, but literally I still wake up every morning. I'm like, man, what do our players need today? And that could be anything, even making staff changes after the season. I took some time and really evaluated where we were, what we were doing, and came back to what do our players need. And so I think if I continue to stay on that track, I got a shot to continue to build when you make it about the players, because the players can feel it, they know it, and I think that part hasn't changed. Whether I was a GA or an assistant or a coordinator, they know. They've always known. They know now that if it's not about them, they'll know.
Was that your first Gatorade bath post Boca Raton Bowl?
You know what? I got one. After we won our last game against Charlotte. I got one, And that was actually like a relatively chilly night in Tampa. And it was as good of a feeling as I've had, getting soaked with water. And then after the Boca Bowl, I tried not to. I said, please don't, but the guys had a ball with it, so we just went with it.
I looked at some of the pictures. I could tell you did not want it.
Yeah, again, like, it's, if the guys didn't want to do it, we probably would have a problem. And so I went with it.
Yeah, look, as long as you're not going full Saban and getting like too upset, after, getting something like that, I think you're good. Speaking of Saban, let's go back to the Bama game, because the initial takeaway, nationally at least, was on the Bama side. But you had to be looking at that game and the way that it played out from your standpoint early in your tenure, going, guys, look at the toughness that we just showed against Bama. And some of the moments, some of the defining moments when Bama is just stuck in the mud offensively and they can't protect the quarterback. What was your takeaway from the way that things played out that day?
Yeah, I think for me, maybe a little bit different. You know, 2 years prior, I'd gotten to Tennessee, and it had been 16 years since we beat him. And it was like this whole Bama, 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 and that feeling after our second year there, where it was like, you know what, like, it's like this untalked about giant within our walls that we finally, or whether you call it a giant, whatever you want to call it, but it was something we overcame, right? And so for me, it was like, there's a standard to beating those guys, and there's a standard that we're going to establish here, that we're going to attack every single game in the same breath. So for me, it was very much, all right, it's the next game. And if I make it bigger or smaller than anything else, these guys will feel it. And it's the next game. And, our guys went out and played specifically defensively at a really, really high rate. They gave us the opportunity to go win. Offensively, we didn't play well enough to go win. Put yards up and move the ball, but couldn't score. And so, again, it was like, what do you want to make of this? We can make this a moral victory and build on, man, we were close to beating Bama, but then again, I'm overemphasizing the importance of this Bama game. Or we take it like every other game and we teach off of our missed opportunities, we embrace the positive things that happened, and we move on. And I think after that game, there were so many questions of, man, like, what does this do for you guys? Is this the confidence builder you needed? And I'll be honest with you, and I don't know that it was so much a rant as much as it was like, man, like, moral victories and these hypotheticals, we played close deals. This is what we heard 2 years ago, in Knoxville. And like, the standard is you win that game, and we didn't reach it, and we're going to coach our kids and explain to them why we didn't. And at the same time say, man, like, you have an opportunity to go win this game, and we don't. And here's the reasons why. But, again, just a little bit guarded of what it could do. I do think it's fascinating. That was our third game in our tenure here, and we went and played really good football for the next couple of weeks and did some things that hadn't been done here in a while. Win a road game, a conference road game, win 2 games in a row. And again, I was super guarded of us as a football program saying, man, we've turned the leaf, because then we went on a couple of week run where we played terrible football. And that's exactly what I was guarding against, was trying to not overemphasize the importance of one game or coming close in the game, or overemphasizing the Alabama game over anybody else. And so was there some positives? Yes. Did we play really good defense? We certainly did. But in terms of the big picture importance of it, I am guarded against saying that it was anything bigger than that.
As an offensive-minded guy, there had to be some moments where you're a year removed from one of the great shootouts that we had of the 14 playoff era, that Bama-Tennessee game, and obviously you're on the right side of that. But as an offensive guy, you probably had some moments that day where you're like, man, even like thinking about your time at UCF, like, you haven't been necessarily a part of a whole lot of those in recent memory where it's that low scoring. Was that kind of unique? Was that like a tough pill to swallow as somebody, you know, that obviously has, you know, great importance on that side of the ball?
Yeah, the 3 points. It's been a minute, been quite a while to score 3 points, and that's probably where a lot of the frustration came from, because you felt like, man, like you know what's going on. We just couldn't execute at a high enough rate in critical situations to get it. You know, third downs actually weren't bad. In the red zone, we could not find a way to get it in there. And Connor, I go back to us not being ready for that moment, and whether it was offensively or as the head coach, at the end of the day, we didn't call a good enough game to go win. We didn't give our guys the best opportunity to go score points, because if we did, we would have scored points, regardless of who the guys are. I think we weren't ready as a program to go win that football game, for a lot of reasons. We weren't strong enough. We weren't big enough. We didn't scheme it well enough. There was a lot of different reasons. Again, I know it sounds a little bit like a long-winded cliche coach answer, but as a program, we weren't ready for that moment. And I truly think as you build a program, and just being a part of building programs here throughout my career, there's these turning point moments in a program where, whether you call it a marquee win or you call it just a marquee moment in a game where you say, you know what, like that is the moment it all turned. And we weren't ready for that to be our moment. And that's okay. We at some point will be, but we weren't ready for that moment at the time. And, you know, our strength coach, who I got a ton of respect for, Gio, who I was with at Iowa State, he was there with us when we built that place. Like, it was so fascinating. I don't know if I've ever told anybody this story, but he came up to me in the locker room after the game, and I was hot, at more so at myself than anybody else, and he's a yo AG. These guys were not ready for what would have come if you won that game. I'm like, whatever, dude. I don't know what that means. Like, that's a cop out. He's like, I'm just telling you. And Gio knows our team better than anybody. He's like, we are not ready for what would come of this if we won this game. And take it for what it's worth. I kind of took it for what it was worth. I think looking back at it after the season, you know, our growth and where we're going and the foundation we're laying, maybe he's right, maybe he's wrong, but we certainly weren't ready for the two after that, where we were on cloud nine, and we certainly didn't perform the way we needed to after. So I think it all happens for a reason. It's all a direct reflection of what our process is. And whenever we're ready for that moment again, we'll win that game.
Never thought about it like that, but it is interesting. Like, given, you know, the state of where you're at, you can kind of see things, how kids would handle success and all that stuff. It's different at the college level than the NFL level. And, you know, obviously you'd rather beat Bama than not beat Bama for what it would do for your program. But that is certainly a point of emphasis. I can totally understand that. Do you feel like you've had that moment? Like the hey, our kids get it. Was it the bowl game? Was it before that? Like, have you had that moment where you've been able to step back and say, I think our kids have bought in, and I think what we're doing is really now sinking in?
Yeah, you know, I think I've had a couple of moments where I've been really proud of where we're at. You know, I think after that bowl game was probably one of them. I think coming through and getting back to that team meeting in January and knowing that our guys that we asked to come back all came back. 100% of them did. I think that was a moment where it was like, man, like these guys, we've made it hard enough and we've made it real enough here within our program that if they didn't truly want to be here, they wouldn't be here. And it's a testament to a lot of different things. Our leadership, the culture within our program. You know, I could give you a handful of players that have behind closed doors said, we're doing it here, and we're doing it with this staff, and we're doing it together. I think those probably two moments. After that bowl game, where it was like, man, like this is a feeling that you need to bottle up and say, one, we're going to play postseason football here in Tampa. Two, man, we played really unselfish, really, really good football. And three, we're going to come back and we're going to do this. And in this day and age of college football and super highly publicized what goes on around the country, like I was super proud, like of all moments over the last year and a half, I was super proud to come back to that team meeting in January and say, all right, these dudes that chose to stay, it's about to get real. And through 9 practices of spring practice, like, man, are we a different football team? Doesn't guarantee wins, doesn't guarantee anything other than we're a year stronger, a year bigger, we're a year more cohesive. We're in year 2 of both systems, offensively and defensively. We're getting closer to a point where the players are holding the standard rather than the coaches. And it's been fascinating to watch. Like, Connor, when I tell you, and I told my wife this last week, like, this is the most fun I've had coaching football, because I feel like they've taken on this identity that we've tried to create, and they have really embraced it, and they've powered through the hard, and it's going to continue to be hard, but they've embraced the hard. And so that's why I say it's the most fun I've ever had. I love walking into this building. I love being with our coaches. I love being with our players. And it's not really about me as much as it's genuinely a really, really cool environment. So not necessarily one specific moment where I feel like we've overcome it completely, but just where we came from, Connor. Holy moly. That's where I think it's refreshing.
Yeah, I have a rule where I don't really like to judge year one coaches. Like, you just finished being a year one coach and you took over a program that obviously, like, you knew what you were walking into. It's 4 wins in the 2020s decade and those 3 seasons before you got there. Or I guess, yeah, that'd be 3 seasons before you got there. So I'll let you be the authority on this. Should we in the media on the outside who don't see the day-to-day, we don't always see the buy-in when that moment happens, should we judge year one coaches at all, or should we just delay that until year 2 because of so many of those different circumstances that each year one coach deals with?
Yeah, that's a great question. Probably a great question to ask administrators. What I could tell you, we're judged on year ones. You know what? I think with how it is right now, it's twofold, right? It's super easy in terms of easier than it's ever been to turn a roster around. It's also as hard as it's ever been to turn a roster around. And so I think it all just depends how you look at it. I think year one, I think people that say it's year 0, it doesn't count. I think that's complete horse crap, because it does. We just played 13 football games, and those were real, and they counted, and those go in the record books, and they're real. And I can promise you, we're all getting evaluated on what those years are. So it is what it is. Recruits are looking at it. Donors are looking at it. Alums are looking at it. So whether you do in the media or not, I think it'd be crazy not to. But in reality, it's a year where you lay a foundation for what the program is. And I said it from day one. I think if you come in and you take a job and you say, man, we're going to build the best team we can, I think you're going to fall short in years 3, 4, 5, and 6, and however long your tenure is. I think if you come in and you say, we're going to build an elite program, and that means setting standards for every single thing within your program, not just for the players, but for the support staff and every single other person around you, including the administration and how they view you and what your demands are of them too. And if you can lay a standard for everything, and then the hardest thing is to actually hold people to it, then you come out of year one and that's successful. But in reality, you've got that year one, you got to recruit from the day you get here, because you've got to, when we inherited 4 wins in 3 years, like, obviously things had to change. And how you evaluate, how you recruit that first class you brought in, and now our second class we brought in, like, whether you say that's year 0 or year 1, gosh darn it, they all matter. And so, man, I don't know, from a media perspective, I certainly think it sets a foundation, and but everybody does inherit different situations. it's really, really hard to say. I think when you inherit a winning program, the fact that all those guys can leave at any point in terms of the players, to say, man, like it should still keep winning. I don't know. That's probably, you got more time to think about that than I do.
How was it juggling play calling duties and head coaching duties for you in year one?
Um, it was fascinating because I felt like in year two at Tennessee was as good of a process as I felt like I established for myself and our staff. And then to go in and say, man, like when I tell you, Connor, every minute of every day was planned out. Every minute of every day was planned out. And when you go and you say, well, the standard for myself is that that's going to remain the same, yet there's other things you got to do, from recruiting to all of it. And especially in year one, like Joel Gordon was phenomenal for us as our offensive coordinator, very much from an organizational standpoint. And I honestly helped a lot in the play calling part of it. Like a lot. Tyler Hudanik, who's our O-line coach, phenomenal in terms of helping us from a play calling standpoint. LaDainian Washington from a pass game standpoint. Like when I tell you, like from a group effort standpoint, and I had to adjust my process in a lot of ways from a group standpoint, it was as much teamwork as you can imagine. And for me, changing my process to say, man, like there's these 2 hours I normally spend on this, I can't. Somebody else has to, and I got to trust that what is being said and what's being installed is right. And so it was interesting. It was fascinating. And when I tell you I went back and reevaluated the entirety of all of it, that was part of it. Like, can I do the job like everybody needs me to, and like I need myself to, while still doing the rest of my job at an elite clip as well. And so I think as you grow in this deal, I think I'm going to continue to evaluate it and see where we are. But I'm thankful I've got Joel here, who I was with at Iowa State for 4 years. We were together there. He did an incredible job of developing Brock Purdy there, and what he's done with the quarterbacks here has been incredible. What he did there from an offensive standpoint was different than what we do here, but he's come in, learned it, embraced it, and like has been phenomenal here for me as well. And so we'll see how it goes as we keep moving forward. But it was interesting. It's certainly different. It's a lot easier up in the press box when you're in a lot of ways playing a video game, and when you get on the field and it's like real, it's right in front of you, and there's a lot more emotion that goes into it. So definitely growth, at least I felt like on my end.
Seems hard. Seems really, really hard to do those things. And hearing you talk about the process, and hey, you got to have people in the building you trust. You got to reevaluate it year by year. I think that's perfectly fair for where you're at. The momentum you're trying to build. It's one thing to improve by 6 wins in year one and do that instantly, but real momentum is felt with the surrounding elements that go into a program of national conversation, facilities, the groundbreaking ceremony that you guys are going to have for the new on-campus stadium is set for this fall. How involved do you get to be in all that? I know it's not happening. It's 2027 is the target date to have things up and running, but are you going to be like out there wearing a hard hat? I know you're not like the biggest hat guy. You're wearing a hat here, which surprised me. That definitely threw me off guard. But like, how involved do you get to be in all that?
Yeah, so I think that twofold. One, the stadium is obviously huge for us. Just bringing football right here to campus is absolutely huge in a lot of different ways and for a lot of different reasons. The football complex that's being built is for me just as exciting, if not more exciting. They're going to be attached next to each other. We got a brand new indoor here right next to our practice fields. This football complex is going to be attached to it and going to tie everything in together. I'm just as excited about that because it's going to be state of the art. It'll be as nice as there is in the country. And we're hopefully going to be in there right before the 26th season. So I'll freaking bring a shovel and drive a crane to get that thing started, and we're going to get that thing rolling here really quickly. But my involvement, to be honest with you, when I first got here, was essentially a wish list of what you need in it. And you talk about all things I was not prepared for. That was one of them, where it was kind of like throw stuff on a board and kind of got out of it. And certainly during the season, I did nothing with it at all. But right after the season, we got the semifinal renderings, and I said, pause, everybody just stop for just a second. And I equate everything to calling plays or running an organization. I'm like, man, like I would never put a play in without watching 3 different teams do it. Some teams screw it up to figure out what the problems are. And then at the end of it, probably claim that I came up with it myself, and that's a joke, but I would never do it without practicing, like making sure it's 100% foolproof. Well, I'm like, I can't do this with this facility. So we got on a plane and literally went and looked at 6 facilities, the last 6 facilities that got built nationally. We did it in 2 days, and it was awesome to go see. Just, man, like I never thought of that, and I never thought of that. And so we kind of came back, put together what was the best of, or what we thought functionally was the best. To be honest with you, more than anything, everywhere I went, I was like, what'd you guys screw up? Like, if you could do something different, what would you do? From a weight room to how the players eat to recovery to even meeting space, all of it. And I thought we came up with a blueprint. We, in a lot of ways, tore it all apart, put it back together. So I was really involved in our facility, the stadium. I don't know anything about building stadiums, and I certainly don't know. Like, got way smarter people than I am for all that. But that facility, I was involved at least in that 2-day span and the meetings afterwards. And now it's on our administration, and my chief of staff is super, super involved in it. But the stadium will be awesome. It's certainly helped with momentum. I think it's so much different, Connor. I'm in my office, and I could point right there, and there's a giant billboard there, and you could actually see where it's going. So when I'm with recruits in my office, and I'm like, that's where it's going. At practice, we're constantly looking at it. Like you said, momentum. Like, momentum is real. Momentum is real. I think for the first year here, we sold, a lot of where we came from, a lot of a vision. We sold, man, this is where we see this place. I think now you're selling, listen, there's a real commitment here, and I said it a couple months ago, but they've spent more money on this football program in the last year than they did in the first 25 years of its existence. And so from the commitment to our staff, to building a real staff, to support staff, to how we feed our guys, how we house our guys, from what the academic support looks like to what the recovery looks like. Like, this is a big time college football program. And in every way, and people say Power 4, Group of 5, like, there is absolutely nothing group of anything about this place in terms of how we're investing in our players and their process and what we're doing. And then you look and you see what the stadium we're building and the facility we're building, and from an NIL perspective, the commitment that's been made to, you look at how we're recruiting, where, we're recruiting at a high clip right now, and we're recruiting against a lot of really good football programs and winning a lot of those battles. And so, again, what is the standard? And the standard here is that this is a big time football program. We're 26 years old, Connor. Like, that's what we are. And I always, whether you take it as an excuse or not, but when we have these conversations with recruits a lot, like, man, like a kid will be coming from, name a place, doesn't matter, Florida. Well, they've been playing football for 130 some years. Florida State, 130 some years. Like, we've been playing football for 26. Like, I came here because I want to continue to lay a foundation for something elite. And in 100 years, I certainly won't be alive, but they're going to talk about this and the foundation we laid and the original team in that stadium. Like, that gives me goosebumps. So there's real momentum because of the commitment. There's real momentum because of how we've recruited. And to be honest with you, there's real momentum because our guys went and in a lot of ways played their tails off in this first year. And I think there's at least a hope.
It's a whole lot easier to sell once you got that proof of concept. And the renderings are unreal. I went and looked at them again yesterday, and I was like, dang, this is This is like real deal stuff, and the commitment, you can tell it's second to none. It's absolutely there. I want to get you out of here. I got 5 rapid fire questions for you. Just first thing that comes to mind. Does that work for you?
Absolutely.
All right, first one. When was the last time you had Portillo's?
Man, like Connor, I'm on this kick right now. I got to lose some weight. This year one, you talk about like year ones are bad. So I have not, but I've not probably since January.
That's
Now,
unfortunate.
I will if they want to help a little bit with certain things around here. I will eat it when they need me to.
Cake shakes in the office fridge.
Stop. Not doing it. Not going there. I've been really good.
Is Florida the South?
Oh man, you're gonna get me in trouble. My wife is from the great state of Arkansas, and the first time we lived in the South, according to her, was when we were in Knoxville, Tennessee, and so I've lived in Ames, Iowa, Champaign, Illinois, Toledo, Ohio with her. We lived in Orlando for a year. The first time she said we were in the South was when we were in Knoxville, Tennessee. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay, that's a fair way to answer this. And people always say like in Florida you have to go north to go south, but it's there are different parts of it.
You're not gonna get me in trouble here, man. There's too many people here from the Northeast and from the South. I ain't getting into it.
Yeah, that's fair. Who's your go-to artist or band right now?
Man, I've been really on Luke Combs lately.
That's good. Can't go wrong with Luke Combs.
Man, I had an opportunity. He was in Tampa this summer, and had an opportunity to hang with him for a while. Man, like dude sat there, picked my brain on USF football for an hour, like complete football junkie, and love what he's about. Certainly love the music. He's awesome.
That's a good answer. Your dream golf foursome, and you can include yourself. So just 3 people that you would love to play golf with.
Not a big golf guy, just so you know, but I get the question. Mike Leach.
That's a good one.
Jay-Z.
Okay. That's the New York connection in you. I see
yes,
that.
Sir.
Yeah.
Whew. Probably John F. Kennedy.
Oh, I like that. That's really, you got two dead, one living, but iconic and for very, very different ways.
A lot of different reasons.
Yeah, that's good.
But it'd be a hell of an 18 holes, man.
That would. Jeez, I'd pay for that. All right, last one for you. I know it's one game at a time, all that stuff. You got things you got to worry about in spring ball, but what would it mean to this program to at least be in those 12-team playoff conversations? Something that probably so out of sight, out of mind at this time last year when you're just trying to be able to figure things out, what you have, but to be part of that, knowing that's there, what would that mean to you?
Yeah. It would be, I think, getting to the standard of what I think this program is, and what I think we all think this program is. Again, we'll get there when we're ready for that moment. I'm so guarded against what's out there and what's being put out, and somehow, some way, we're in the conversation, which is awesome. We'll take it in terms of the momentum we need recruiting wise. Inside of our walls, I've lost my mind in team meetings more than you know on guarding our program against that. Expectations are awesome because that means people are actually, 1, talking about us, 2, are relevant enough to be in the conversation. The reality is, the second we start thinking that's who we are, I told our guys as early as this morning, or as soon as this morning, as soon as you start thinking you're somebody or something, you'll get knocked out. And so I think it's great that we're in the conversation. I think it's great that people think that there's a chance. I think for us, it would be what the standard should be here. When we get there, is up to what we do right now. Honestly, in a lot of ways, how we finish spring, how we get attacked this summer. But I think that's what this program is. That's what it should be. I mean, we've got a lot of reasons for it to beat that. And so we'll get there when we're ready, but I appreciate people bringing it up.
Alex, has been great. Really appreciate the time. Best of luck with everything this year. Go get some Portillo's soon. You need a cheat meal.
Man, I'm trying to stay away from the cheap meals. I'm trying to get right, and I tell our players all the time, you got to be willing to do hard things. And for me, driving by Portillo's every day on my way home, and I mean it too. Like I tell them all the time, elite people don't do things that normal people do. And if I'm gonna claim that, I'm gonna drive by Portillo's and I'm gonna make it hard.
Nothing wrong with that, man. Nothing wrong with that. Appreciate it, man.
I appreciate you as well. Thanks for having me on.
Will, I am sad to say that our jersey contest has come to an end. Don't be sad it's over. Be happy that it happened. You are wearing our jersey contest winner, Mr. Bobby Boucher, winner, and I think MVP. I don't know that they named him MVP officially, but I'm guessing, even though he only played one half of the Bourbon Bowl, that he was indeed MVP. Not a game used jersey from Mr. Bobby Boucher. That one is probably ripped
close
in
enough.
shreds.
I mean, I'm basically him, but yeah,
That's perfectly fair. The second you came on with that, it was winning, Will. It was winning. It was never going to not win. Bobby Boucher is a very worthy winner of our jersey contest. As Lauren would say, congratulations or whatever.
That's electric. Yeah, I'm sure Claire's not going to be competitive at all. But yeah, I like I said, I rewatched this movie the other day. I took Andrea to Louisiana, and I was like, I'll be teaching about Cajun culture a little bit. Got her some boudin, some andouille, some water boy. You know what I'm saying? And I went back. It's funny because like I said, the pretext there, we see all these people that we see every day now that were cameos. Like Corso was in there, Cowher was in there, Chris Fowler was in there, Dan Fouts. Like they were like cut away, because when I watched the movie when I was little, I was like in the sports, but I wasn't like a sicko the way I am now. It's like, man, like the joke with Lawrence Taylor where he's just like, yeah, that brings me to the next point, stay off crack. And I was like, that's so electric. Like it's like, if you know, you know, you know. And so point being, like, yeah, that movie is just really well done. And I think it's like an all-timer. I think it's one of those things where, looking back on it, he could have done that so incorrectly. But I think everyone who's from Louisiana has like a little connection to that movie, because it's not wrong. Like I always joke about, it's like not everyone from Louisiana. I do get defensive, especially with the way people were just kind of mean about Coach O and think we're all stupid. But it's like, I happen to live off of Swamp Road, have cousins that catch alligators and ride airboats on the 4th of July. We're not all like that, but I happen to be, okay? So, like, that's the cool thing about this movie, is that, like, he was able to play a character, kind of, like, shine, like, poke fun at Cajuns respectfully. So I've always loved it. And, like, when you think about, it's all about kind of like a lad of the week thing in the way where it's like, it's all about between your ears. Like, if you could get angry, if you could get motivated, you could be Bobby Boucher for a half,
Do you think Adam Sandler did boots on the ground character research in Louisiana before taking on that role and going all in with the accent that he chose for Bobby Boucher?
So he actually played a character on SNL called Cajun Man. And they would bring him. They would bring him on the weekend, and that character was definitely more insensitive, because it was like straw hat, like type of guy. But I remember they would do like the sports update, and it would just be like, like USC Trojans, and it was like stuff like that. But I think that it evolved over time to where by the time he did Waterboy, it was a little bit more like there's some nuance to Waterboy,
There's also, I think, a very misconstrued portrayal of Cajun food in that movie.
Yeah.
Everything that's put on a plate in that movie somehow looks disgusting, and everything I've ever eaten in the great state of Louisiana has been delicious. Or anything that has tried to be like the great state of Louisiana. So to me, that's probably the biggest knock I have on the entire movie as a whole. Is what are they? She's like cooking squirrel, stuff like that. Like,
there's like, it's all gator, it's like rubbery. Yeah, it's also the scene with the cookout is so funny with Vicky Valancourt, where they're just like, hey, like the way he invites her is really funny. I'm not gonna like do the voice because I'm not gonna like nail the line, but like when they're sitting there just like eating like rubber gators, it's actually hilarious. But yeah, exactly to your point. I said this the other day on there. It's like there are two kinds of great food in Louisiana. There's stuff you get on the gas station on the random side of the road, like what my Uncle Ricky and them were cooking up, last weekend. And then you got the stuff in New Orleans that's like really high class, like really Michelin quality food. Most of it's that first category. Most of it you walk in, you're like, huh, and you taste it, you're like, wow, this is actually the best food I've ever had. Oh my God.
Look, I would eat either. I absolutely would. You give me a crawfish po' boy, and I'm happy. I'm good. That food tour that I did in the French Quarter during that weekend that we spent at LSU, and we stayed in New Orleans. It was second to none. I still think about it every once in a while. I'll scroll back into my camera and look at old photos of that food, and just think about going back and being able to just spend a day walking and eating. There are a few days on this earth in which we get to do those two things and only those two things.
Yep.
And we must appreciate those at all costs. But yes, a worthy winner, a very worthy winner. My fear with this contest was that we were going to have a winner that I kind of looked at and I was like, I don't really think that of, the 25 jerseys that we're going to have represented, whatever the final number ended up being, that this was just like a random jersey that a random fan base liked. Bobby Boucher Waterboy jersey with the Bourbon Bowl patch. Very key. I don't think you can get a Bobby Boucher jersey without the Bourbon Bowl patch, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't know. You'd have to, hit up Michael Rubin and Fanatic, see if they could kind of sew it together in the back room.
Yeah, exactly. But yes, great stuff, Will. I would like
let me say this one more fun fact about that movie. Do you remember what team it was that he blocked the field goal against? Because it's the funniest answer imaginable.
Wasn't it Iowa?
It was Iowa.
Yeah.
It was Iowa. I was like, this movie is aged like fine wine. Because they lost to North Dakota State not too long ago.
That's true. Yeah, they lost. What was that? That was the 18 opener. I want to say, because 17 they opened the season against Wyoming. They opened the season against Josh Allen. I remember.
Yep.
Why do I remember Iowa's season openers? My goodness, Connor. Just that Uber Eats commercial right now. That's like, hey, in order to learn something, you got to forget something. You have jelly rolls in it, and David Beckham and Posh Spice. They got a commercial or two. I'd like to be able to do that for a lot of these different things. To tell you, why do I remember for a movie that, quite honestly, I've probably not seen Waterboy in 10 to 15 years, and need to rewatch it. But why do I remember that field goal game against Iowa? I can't remember these basic things about, my family's needs.
Thank goodness we have this podcast, Connor, because I certainly would have to reevaluate my life.
Oh, gosh.
Sitting there on 2 a.m. scrolling through Wikipedia, like, I might need this fun fact about Chris Kleiman one day. Hold on, let me keep perusing.
The bad thing is if you did an MRI of my brain at this point now, because of all of the dumb things that I pick up going through the IMDb page of a movie that we are actively watching, that stuff's in there.
Yeah.
Like the amount of casting decisions that I know about for movies that we watch, be like, oh, this person turned down this role. This person turned down that role. Oh, did you know this scene was actually not supposed to look like that? And this was a cameo that came out of nowhere. I'm like, nobody needs to know whatsoever that Al Pacino, or it wasn't Al Pacino, it was Dustin Hoffman, my bad, was actually just in the area while The Holiday was being shot. And he strolled into this video store that Kate Winslet and Jack Black are in. And he just strolled in there and was like, oh, hey, I'd love to have a role in this. And he just did. Nobody needs to know that. I don't need to know that. This is a 10-second scene. Can I get this out of my brain? I don't think I can.
You're telling me this is the wildest thing we have in common. I work in television and my brain is chock full of useless college football stuff. You work in college football and your brain is chock full of television.
There's useless college football stuff up there as well.
No, it's useful because you work in college football. That's what I'm saying.
True. Very true. All right, so I would like to be able to get jersey stories going. It might be a little bit more of an intermittent schedule with it in the way that we kind of roll these out. But please send me your jersey stories. I would love, sentimental stories. Hey, got this from a relative who passed or something like that. Or, hey, this is my good luck jersey that I wear to every single game. This jersey is 15-0 when I go to specific games, or something like that. I've got a mustard stain that I refuse to be able to wash because I think it's good luck. Whatever. It doesn't have to be, superstitious or anything like that, but just something that gives you good memories. Email me.
Stitious, though.
A little stitious. I am a little stitious. But email me. COGARA@SaturdayDownSouth.com. COGARA@SaturdayDownSouth.com. Please email me. Would love to be able to get some of these stories on the air to be able to share this. And if you want to be anonymous, that's perfectly fine too. If it's kind of a weird memory or something like that, that's perfectly okay. All right. If you have not, leave us a 5-star review, subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch every episode of the Saturday Down South podcast. Follow us on the app formerly known as Twitter, at the SDS Pod, at Sat Down South, at TJ O'Gara, at Go So Hard. Thanks, guys. Talk soon.